My back slammed against the cold wrought iron gate, a sharp pain radiating through my shoulder from the brutal shove of the man I called my husband. Beyond the gate, I could hear the cheerful chatter of the landscaping crew and the clinking of glasses from the caterers. The party was in full swing, preparations underway for a lavish evening. And here I was, the owner of this $5 million Beverly Hills mansion, being viciously berated by my mother-in-law. "Get out of my sight," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "White trash like you has no place in a house like this, you ungrateful leech." She stood there, Brenda Harrison, my mother-in-law. She was dressed in a designer Oscar de la Renta silk gown, her hair in an elegant chignon secured by a vintage jade brooch, the very picture of a queen banishing a courtier who had crossed her. Beside her, my husband, Michael, just stared at the ground, avoiding my gaze. His silence was more agonizing than 1,000 insults. I didn't cry. Strangely, when humiliation and pain reach their absolute nadir, tears become a meaningless luxury. I simply stood up, brushed the dirt from my designer silk dress, and gave them a look so calm it was chilling. This is one of the poignant stories sent to us by a listener. She hopes to hear your sincere and objective advice in the comments below to find the right path for her life after the storm. Her story begins now. My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed. I'm 35 years old. Most people look at my life with a mixture of envy and admiration. They see a successful woman, a renowned clinical psychologist, the author of several best-selling books, and the owner of one of the most magnificent garden estates in this exclusive zip code. They see a mild-mannered husband and a seemingly respectable, well-to-do family. But they don't see, or perhaps I've become too skilled at hiding the deep fissures, cracking that glamorous facade from the inside. That day should have been a happy one. I had just closed a major psychological consulting contract with a Fortune 500 corporation, bringing in a profit large enough to take the entire family on a 2-week European vacation. But when I returned home, brimming with excitement, I wasn't greeted by my husband's smile but by an atmosphere so tense it was suffocating. My mother-in-law, Brenda, was perched on the sofa like a hawk, my sister-in-law, Tiffany, at her side. She threw a stack of credit card statements onto the coffee table in front of me. "Look at this," she seethed. "Look at what your precious sister has been spending. In 1 month, she charged almost $2,000 to Mike's card. $2,000. What kind of family did you come from, raising a grifter like that?" I was speechless. That was a supplementary card I had given Michael for household expenses. I never imagined he would give it to his mother. I tried to explain. "Brenda, there must be some misunderstanding. I'll look into it." I'm sure my sister didn't realize. Didn't realize what? Brenda slammed her hand on the table, cutting me off. "You're covering for her, aren't you? This family has had nothing but bad luck since you arrived. All you do is funnel our money to your trashy relatives." Her baseless accusation was the spark that ignited a long simmering powder keg, but what truly shattered me was Michael's reaction. He stood there, listening to his mother slander his wife, listening to her vilify my family, and said nothing in my defense. When I turned to him, my eyes pleading for help, he just shook his head slightly and whispered, "Evie, just let it go for now. Mom's upset. Let it go." I had been letting it go for 10 years. I let it go when his mother made unreasonable demands for money. I let it go when his sister treated my home like a free-for-all, taking my things without asking. I let it go every single time my husband prioritized his mother's and sister's feelings over his own wife's. I can't let it go anymore. My voice trembled. This is my house. That is money I earned. You have no right to insult me and my family like this. Oh, the nerve of this one. Brenda shot to her feet, jabbing a finger in my face. Your house? Don't you forget you married into this family. Where your husband is, that's your home. And he won't tolerate a disrespectful wife like you. Mike, get her out of my house. Get her out now. And then the most horrifying moment happened. Michael, the man I loved, the man for whom I had sacrificed everything, actually walked over, grabbed my arm, and dragged me towards the door. "Just go outside and cool off, until Mom calms down," were his last words before he and his mother shoved me, sending me tumbling onto the stone porch. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind me, final and cold. I sat there on the chilly flagstones, hearing Brenda's triumphant voice echo from within. "Excellent, son. Tonight, we'll throw a party just for me. Invite all my friends. Let them see who the real master of this house is." A party. They were going to throw a party right after kicking me out. A victory party. A silent, cold rage rose from the depths of my soul. It wasn't loud or frantic. It was icy, sharp, and perfectly clear. I stood up, adjusted my clothes, and wiped a smudge of dirt from my hand. I didn't leave. I walked back, not to bang on the door or to beg. I moved quietly to the side of the house, where a small path led to the secondary kitchen, where the catering staff was working. Taking advantage of a moment when no one was looking, I slipped into the wine cellar. I had designed this room myself. It held hundreds of rare vintages from around the world. I knew exactly which bottle was Brenda's favorite. A ridiculously expensive, Screaming Eagle Cabernet Sauvignon. She loved to show off to her friends. I took a fountain pen from my purse. Its cartridge contained not ink, but a harmless, colorless, odorless herbal powder I had formulated myself to aid sleep. But I didn't need them to sleep well. I needed something else entirely. I took out a small, elegant, cream-colored sticky note from my wallet. With carefully practiced penmanship, impossible to trace back to me, I wrote a single line. I didn't put the powder in the wine. This is just a warning. I carefully slid the note under the foil capsule around the neck of Brenda's favorite bottle, in a spot where anyone opening it would be sure to see. My task complete, I slipped away like a ghost. I walked off the grounds of my own estate, without a single glance back. I knew my nightmare might have temporarily ended, but theirs was just beginning. And I knew their lavish party, a celebration built on my pain, was about to become the stage for a drama of my own direction. Sitting in the back of the Uber, I watched my magnificent home recede through the glass, now blurred by tears I hadn't realized I was crying. The thumping bass of the party music still faintly reached me, a bitter mockery for someone just exiled from her own life. My hand clenched my phone, my heart filled not with weakness or despair, but with a frightening emptiness. 10 years. A full decade. I had poured my youth, my intellect, and my love into building what I thought was a family, only to be stabbed in the back with such cruel precision. I remember the day I met Michael as if it were yesterday. I was 25, a young woman full of dreams and ambitions, having just successfully defended my master's thesis in psychology. I was navigating the sprawling, competitive landscape of Los Angeles on my own, armed with nothing but a relentless mind and an unyielding heart. I met him at a personal development seminar. He wasn't the most charismatic or outspoken man in the room, but he had a kind smile and a sincere gaze that drew me in. He sat quietly in a corner, listening intently to my presentation on the power of the subconscious mind. After the seminar, he waited for me by the exit with a cold iced tea. "Your talk was amazing," he said, his voice a little shy. "I learned so much." We started talking, and I realized he was my complete opposite. I was dynamic, decisive, always pushing forward. He was content, calm, and preferred a life of peaceful stability. That difference didn't push us apart. It was like two opposite poles of a magnet pulling us together. I found in him a tranquility I lacked, and he saw in me a fire he admired. Our love blossomed naturally. He told me about his family back in a small town in Ohio, about his mother who had worked tirelessly after his father passed away to raise him and his siblings. He spoke of the hardships he'd faced. I was moved by his devotion to his family, believing that a man who loved his mother so deeply would surely be a good husband. After 2 years, we decided to get married. Around that time, I signed the publishing deal for my first book and received a substantial advance. Without hesitation, I used all of it, plus my savings, to buy a large plot of land in Beverly Hills. I told Michael, "I want to build our home with my own hands, a true sanctuary for us. It will have a garden full of flowers, a small pond, and enough space for our children one day." He held me close, his eyes shining with happiness. "As long as I'm with you, anywhere is home," he said. That mansion was my creation. I spent countless sleepless nights drawing up the blueprints myself, selecting every tile, every curtain. I wanted it to be perfect, a symbol of our love and success. Michael was supportive, often accompanying me to look at materials and oversee the construction. Seeing him in a hard hat, his face beaded with sweat, I was convinced I had chosen the right man to walk with me for the rest of my life. A year later, the mansion was completed, just in time for our wedding. I put the deeds solely in my name. It wasn't because I was calculating, but because it was my passion project, an asset I created with my own premarital funds. Michael agreed completely. "The house is yours, Evie," he said. "I'm just the lucky guy who gets to live in it." I cried tears of joy hearing that, thinking this level of understanding and respect would be the unshakable foundation of our marriage. To fully dedicate myself to building our new life, I had to make a difficult choice. Stanford University had offered me a fully funded PhD program. It was a golden opportunity, the dream of anyone in my field, but accepting it meant we'd be apart for at least 3 years. Looking at Michael, looking at the beautiful home we had just finished, I made my decision. I turned it down. "I can always rebuild my career," I told him, "but our family is once in a lifetime. I choose to stay with you." He held me and said, "I'm so grateful for your sacrifice. I promise I will never betray your heart." Thinking back on that promise now, it's a bitter, ironic pill to swallow. The first years of our marriage were truly a paradise. We planted the garden together, cooked dinners, and watched old movies. My career flourished. More books were published, major consulting contracts rolled in. I became the primary breadwinner, but I never saw it as a burden. I was happy to provide a comfortable life for my husband, allowing him to pursue the stable office job he enjoyed. I thought as long as we loved each other, nothing else mattered. But I was too naive. I forgot that even the greatest love can be eroded by the gritty realities of life and family politics. The tragedy of my marriage didn't start with a hurricane. It began with a seemingly ordinary and well-intentioned request from Michael. A request that threw open the doors of my home to strangers who would slowly transform my sanctuary into a stage for their greed. I remember it was a rainy evening. We were sitting on the covered patio, listening to the gentle pitter-patter. Michael suddenly took my hand, his voice low. "Evie, Mom's all alone back in Ohio, and her health isn't what it used to be. I want to bring her out here to live with us for a while, so we can take care of her. What do you think?" His proposal made me hesitate. This house was my private space, a place I cherished deeply. But seeing the worry and filial love in Michael's eyes, I couldn't bring myself to refuse. She was his mother, after all, the woman who had raised him. Caring for one's parents was the right thing to do. Besides, the house was huge. What difference would one more person make? And so, I nodded. I had no idea that single nod was the first step into a quagmire that would take me 10 years and immeasurable pain to escape. The day Brenda arrived with her suitcases from Ohio, I drove to LAX to pick her up. She was thinner and more weathered than I had imagined. Upon seeing me, her eyes welled up with tears as she clutched my hand. "Evelyn, thank you, my dear. I'm just an old woman, hoping for a place to rest my bones in my final years." I was touched and quickly took her luggage. "Don't say that, Brenda, please. Think of this as your own home." I had already prepared a beautiful guest room on the ground floor, with a large window overlooking the garden. It was the quietest and sunniest room in the house. I wanted her to feel comfortable from the very beginning. And for the first month, she did seem like a breath of fresh air. She'd wake up early to cook us breakfast with a Midwestern touch, and she kept the house even cleaner than the weekly service I hired. When I came home from work exhausted, she'd have a glass of orange juice ready for me. Michael was overjoyed. "See? I told you it would be better with Mom here," he'd say constantly. I smiled, feeling I had made the right choice, even thinking my initial worries were just selfishness. But that peace didn't last. Once she grew accustomed to the LA lifestyle, to the luxury of the mansion, Brenda began to change. At first, it was just small, nitpicky comments. "Evelyn, dear, why do you buy so many clothes? You can't possibly wear them all. What a waste." Or, "Eating out is so expensive and unhealthy. You should cook at home more often for your husband." I would just laugh it off, thinking it was typical mother-in-law frugality. But the suggestions became more frequent and shifted from constructive to controlling. She started interfering with my home decor, moving my favorite potted orchid without asking, replacing my antique tea set with a garish, mass-produced one she bought at a discount store. When I gently questioned her, she'd get defensive. "I think this has better feng shui. You're too young to understand these things." The situation escalated to a crisis point when Tiffany, my sister-in-law, showed up unexpectedly. She arrived with a huge suitcase, her eyes puffy from crying, claiming she'd had a huge fight with her boyfriend and needed to stay with her mom and brother for a few days to clear her head. Her few days turned into weeks, then months. Tiffany was a younger, more entitled version of her mother. She was lazy, never lifting a finger to help with anything, and treated my hospitality as her birthright. She left her clothes strewn everywhere and never cleared her plate after eating. Worse, she would casually use my expensive cosmetics and try on my designer dresses without asking. When I complained to Michael, he just waved his hand dismissively. "Come on, Evie. She's heartbroken. Just cut her some slack. She'll be gone in a few days." My peaceful home had slowly morphed into a chaotic marketplace. The sound of Brenda's TV blasting at full volume, Tiffany's loud, gossipy phone calls, and their constant whispers and criticisms behind my back. I felt like a tenant in my own house. My privacy was invaded, and basic respect was non-existent. But every time I was about to speak up, Michael would be the first to shut it down. "Don't make a big deal out of it. Mom's old, and Tiff is just immature. You're the sister-in-law. You have to be the bigger person." Those two words, bigger person, became a tightening band around my head. Because I loved him, because I wanted peace in the family, I once again chose silence. But I didn't realize my silence wasn't grace. It was enablement. It allowed their greed and selfishness to fester and grow, until one day it would turn around and devour me whole. They started to meddle not just in my life, but in my finances. Brenda began by asking for small amounts for groceries. Soon, she was demanding a fixed monthly allowance to manage the household. "Just give me the money, dear," she'd say. "I'll take care of everything. You won't have to worry about a thing." I politely declined, explaining that my finances were already carefully planned. She gave me the silent treatment for a week. Michael, of course, sided with her. "What's the big deal, Evie? Just give her some. She's running the house, after all." In the end, I had to give in. Tiffany was even more shameless. One day, it was money for a new laptop to find a job. The next, it was for a professional development course. I knew these were lies, but every time I refused, she would run crying to her mother and brother. And I would once again be cast as the selfish, stingy wife in my husband's eyes. I felt trapped in an invisible net. The more I struggled, the tighter it became. I tried to have serious talks with Michael countless times. I told him, "It's not about the money, Mike. It's about respect. I can't accept your mother and sister treating me like a personal ATM." In those moments, he would just be silent. His silence was more terrifying than any argument. It revealed his powerlessness, his weakness, and the truth that, deep down, he had already chosen his family's side, not mine. I began to feel utterly alone in my own marriage. The man I once saw as my rock had become the wall separating me from fairness. I threw myself into my work, taking on bigger projects as a way to escape the suffocating reality at home. I thought that if I just earned more money, maybe they would be satisfied, maybe they would leave me in peace. But that was another mistake. Money didn't satisfy them, it only made their greed bottomless. They began to see what I earned not as mine, but as the collective property of this extended family. A family in which I, the one who created it all, had no voice. Looking back, I always wonder if my patience was a virtue or just a form of weakness that allowed evil to take root. There's a fine line between being forgiving and being a doormat. Had I unknowingly crossed that line long ago? To our listeners, if you were in my shoes at that time, would you have confronted them from the start, or would you also have chosen patience for the sake of family? Please, let me know your thoughts. And then, my patience finally snapped. Not over the daily petty conflicts, but because of one single, shameless act that exposed the full, greedy nature of their character. An act that made me realize I could not sink any deeper into this mire. After I agreed to give Brenda a fixed monthly allowance and occasionally fund Tiffany's emergencies. The atmosphere in the house seemed to calm down. But it was just the false quiet before a much larger storm. Brenda and Tiffany stopped criticizing me over small things. Instead, they shifted to a more sophisticated form of extortion, a psychological war of attrition that wore me down day by day. Brenda began her pity campaign. At every dinner, she would sigh dramatically and talk about her old friends back in Ohio. One had a son who bought her a condo in Florida. Another had a daughter-in-law who took her on a cruise to the Caribbean. She never addressed me directly, but every word was a needle prick. "My old neighbor, Sharon, is so lucky," she'd say. "Her daughter-in-law makes good money and is so thoughtful. Takes her to the spa every month, buys her designer bags, not like some people." Tiffany would immediately chime in. "Well, Mom, it depends on the daughter-in-law. Some treat their mother-in-law like their own mother, and some just see them as a burden." They would go back and forth like this, while Michael just sat there, head down, pretending not to hear. His silence was a tacit agreement. I swallowed the bitter food, trying to keep a neutral expression, but it felt like 1,000 ants were crawling under my skin. They were using toxic words to chip away at my self-esteem, to make me feel like a guilty, ungrateful daughter-in-law. It didn't stop there. They began to isolate me in my own home. When Michael came home from work, his mother and sister would immediately swarm him, one pouring him a drink, the other chattering away. They deliberately created a closed circle that pushed me out. Many evenings, I would sit alone in the living room, watching the three of them laughing and talking in the kitchen. I felt redundant, completely out of place. When I tried to join the conversation, they would either change the subject or give me one-word answers. Eventually, I stopped trying. I became withdrawn, going straight to my home office after work and closing the door. It was the only space where I could breathe. But even then, they wouldn't leave me alone. Tiffany would constantly knock on my door with some excuse. "Evie, my laptop's acting up. Can you fix it? Evie, this presentation is so hard. Can you just do it for me?" She knew I couldn't refuse, because if I said no, she would run to her mother and brother, and I would once again be the petty sister-in-law. I had become their unpaid assistant, their reluctant tutor. Day by day, I felt more exhausted, physically and mentally. My work was already demanding, and coming home meant facing a never-ending battle. I lost weight, and sleepless nights became the norm. I tried to seek solace from Michael, but all I received was indifference. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat up and shook him awake. "Michael, do you even see how I'm living? I can barely breathe anymore." Michael grunted, annoyed. "What is it now? Can't you just let me sleep? I've had a long day." "It's your mother and sister." My voice broke into a sob. "They're treating me like a servant in this house. They're draining the life out of me. Don't you see that?" "Oh, come on, Evie. You're being overly sensitive," he said, turning his back to me. "Mom and Tiff are just a bit blunt. We're all family. Just let it go." He rolled over and went back to sleep. I sat there in the darkness, tears streaming down my face. This man, my husband, felt like a cruel stranger. He wasn't just failing to protect me. He was invalidating my pain, telling me it was all in my head. Despair washed over me. I realized that in this war, I was completely alone. I started having dark thoughts. Sometimes, driving on the freeway, I'd have the urge to just slam on the gas and crash into something. But then the image of myself, of my aging parents, of the career I had worked so hard to build, would pull me back. I couldn't give up. I couldn't let them destroy me. If no one was going to save me, I would have to save myself. I began to quietly prepare my exit strategy. I no longer foolishly believed in the word family. I started separating my finances. New income from projects went into a separate account solely in my name, not our joint one. I also began collecting evidence receipts from Tiffany's lavish shopping sprees on my card, audio recordings of conversations where Brenda inadvertently revealed her manipulative schemes. I saved everything meticulously. I didn't know when I would use it, but I knew that one day, it would be my weapon. Their demands grew more audacious. Brenda stopped hinting. She told me directly, "The car you're driving is getting old. Michael is a manager now. It's embarrassing for him to be seen in that. You should buy him a new one." I said nothing. Tiffany demanded I invest in her new online boutique. "You're a successful businesswoman, Evie. You have experience. Just give me some startup capital. Think of it as helping me out." Helping her out? Or throwing money into a black hole? I knew her well enough to know the boutique wouldn't last 3 months. I kept refusing, and each refusal sent shockwaves through the house. They would team up to attack me, calling me cold-hearted and money-obsessed. Michael no longer pretended to be neutral. He openly sided with them. "What's the point of you making so much money if you won't take care of your husband's family? Do you want to tear this family apart?" Tear it apart? I laughed bitterly. This family was torn apart long ago. It was torn apart the day you let your mother and sister walk in here and trample all over my dignity. I lived in that hell, a hell disguised by the word family, for a long time. My endurance was stretched to its limit, like a guitar string about to snap. And then, the fateful day arrived. An incident that became the final drop of water, causing the glass to overflow, completely severing the last fragile thread of my patience, and forcing me to make a decision that would change all of our lives forever. The last straw wasn't a demand for money, but something far more cruel and insidious. It targeted my professional pride, my life's work, and my ethics. My firm was in the final stages of bidding for a major city project, the design and planning of a large community cultural center. This wasn't just about a massive profit, it was a legacy project, a chance to make a real contribution to society. I poured my heart and soul into it, staying up for nights on end to perfect the design proposal. The bid file, containing detailed blueprints, unique psychological analyses of user experience, and groundbreaking ideas, was my masterpiece. I had carefully saved everything onto a single, specially encrypted USB drive, keeping only that one copy to ensure absolute confidentiality. The night before the bid was due, I was exhausted and careless. I left the USB drive on my desk in our bedroom. The next morning, in my rush to get to the presentation, I forgot to check for it. I never imagined such a small oversight would pave the way for such a dark conspiracy. On the day of the presentation, as I stood before the city council, I confidently opened my briefcase. My heart stopped. The USB drive was gone. A cold sweat broke out all over my body. I frantically searched everywhere, but it was hopeless. I had to apologize to the council and ask for an extension, an incredibly unprofessional move that all but disqualified me from the running. I drove home in a daze, a mix of disappointment, rage, and a vague, sickening suspicion. The house was empty. I went straight to the bedroom, and then I saw it. My USB drive was sitting nonchalantly on Tiffany's vanity table, right next to her open makeup palette. A rage I had never felt before erupted inside me. I snatched the drive and stormed out of the room, just as Tiffany waltzed in, her arms full of shopping bags. "What is this?" I held the drive in her face, my voice shaking with fury. "Why was this in your room?" Tiffany looked startled, but quickly recovered her usual brazen attitude. She shrugged. "I saw it on your desk. I thought it was just some old thing you weren't using, so I took it to see if I could use it. What's the big deal?" "An old thing?" I screamed. "Do you have any idea that this is my life's work? Do you know that because of you, I just lost the biggest opportunity of my career?" "So what?" Tiffany's chin shot up. "You lose one opportunity, you'll get another. You're so rich, what's the problem? Making a huge fuss over a stupid USB stick. God, you're so cheap." Just then, Brenda and Michael came home. Seeing the tension, Brenda immediately rushed in. Without asking a single question, she pushed me aside to shield her daughter. "What are you doing to her? She didn't do anything. Why are you yelling at her? It was an accident. You're the older one. Can't you be a little forgiving?" I turned to Michael, my gaze no longer pleading, but challenging. "Look at this, Michael. Look at what your sister did. She stole a critical document. She sabotaged my career. Are you going to tell me to let it go again?" Michael looked at the USB in my hand, then at Tiffany's fake, fearful expression. He let out a long, weary sigh, a familiar refrain. "Come on, Evie. Tiff didn't mean it. What's done is done. If we don't get this project, we'll get another one. Don't blow this out of proportion. We're family. Family. That damned word again. Even when his sister committed a serious offense, essentially intellectual property theft, he still dismissed it as a minor issue and demanded I overlook it. In that exact moment, I had a complete awakening. I realized that to these people, my career, my passion, my pain, none of it had any value. The only thing that mattered was their own peace, the integrity of the fake family they had built. My existence, my success, had become a thorn in their side, an uncomfortable contrast to their own incompetence and laziness. Sabotaging the USB probably wasn't just an accident. It was a subconscious act of malice, and that's what led to me being thrown out of the house. The shock of losing the project, combined with the family's blatant cover-up, made me lose my cool. I unleashed all my pent-up frustrations, and the result was me being pushed out the door to the sounds of Brenda's glee, Tiffany's smugness, and Michael's cowardice. I sat there, in the garden I had personally cultivated, listening to them discuss their celebratory party, and in my mind, a plan began to form. A plan not just to reclaim justice, but to teach them a lesson in the one subject I was an expert in: human psychology. I knew their weaknesses. Brenda was terrified of losing face, of public humiliation. Michael feared failure and being seen as weak. Tiffany feared poverty and not being able to live her lavish lifestyle. And all of them feared one thing above all else: losing control. I wouldn't use money to fight them. I wouldn't use power to crush them. I would use their own fear and greed as my weapons. I would turn their victory party into a stage where they would perform the play of their own downfall. I slipped away quietly, leaving that note not as a curse, but as a seed of doubt. I knew that in the fertile ground of their envious and selfish minds, that seed would sprout very, very quickly. Soon, it would grow into a monstrous tree of fear, drowning them all in the darkness of suspicion. I left the mansion not in the shame of defeat, but with the terrifying silence of someone plotting a comeback. I didn't go far. I checked into a luxury hotel directly across from my gated community, taking a top-floor suite with a balcony that had a direct view of my house. From here, I could observe every move, like a director, watching their own stage from a high perch. I ordered a glass of Cabernet, the same kind Brenda loved, the kind she was probably about to open to celebrate. I stood on the balcony, letting the cool night wind clear my head. Down below, my mansion was ablaze with light. A line of luxury cars began to snake up the driveway. Their party had begun. Inside, the atmosphere was festive. Brenda, in her silk gown, glided through the rooms, greeting her gossipy, social climbing friends with a triumphant air. She boasted about the magnificent estate, her successful son, and her beautiful daughter who was about to marry well. She didn't forget to sprinkle in a few tearful anecdotes about her ungrateful former daughter-in-law, painting herself as a long-suffering, benevolent matriarch. "Thank God my Michael finally saw the light," she said with a dramatic sigh. "He was decisive. We finally got rid of the dead weight, and now there's peace in the house." Michael stood beside her, forcing a polite smile, but I knew that deep down he was uneasy. He was afraid I would come back and cause a scene. Tiffany was in her element, flitting about in a revealing dress, showing off the mansion as if it were her own. The party reached its peak. A server brought out the bottle of Screaming Eagle, the very bottle where I had left my little gift. Brenda beamed as she took it, wanting to personally open the prized vintage for her most important guests. "My daughter-in-law bought this," she announced loudly. "She had good taste in things, I'll give her that." As for her character, she let the sentence hang, but everyone understood. She took the corkscrew and expertly began to remove the foil capsule. And then, she froze. A small, cream-colored sticky note fluttered out from under the foil, landing gently on the pristine white tablecloth. The entire table fell silent. Brenda frowned, annoyed by the interruption. She was about to brush it away, but a curious guest snatched it up. "What's this?" The guest read the words aloud, her voice filled with surprise. "One of the fine wines at tonight's party has been enhanced with a special, colorless, odorless herb. Good luck." The boisterous room fell dead silent. Everyone looked at each other, then at the glasses of wine on the tables. Special, colorless, odorless herb. The words planted a seed of terror in their hearts. Brenda's face went pale. She snatched the note, read it again, and then snapped. What a pathetic joke. It's that ex-wife of Michael's. She's bitter and trying to ruin the party. Everyone please relax. It's nothing. She tried to sound reassuring, but her voice trembled. She motioned for the server to take the bottle away, but it was too late. The seed of suspicion had been sown. A low murmur spread through the room. Some thought it was a prank, but others began to worry. They eyed the food and drinks before them with apprehension. The festive mood vanished, replaced by a tense, suffocating silence. Brenda tried to salvage the situation, moving from table to table, laughing and raising her glass, but no one was in the mood. They would take a reluctant sip and put their glasses down. And then, what I was waiting for happened. An elderly guest, a woman with a history of heart problems and a nervous disposition, suddenly began to cough violently. It was just from choking on some water, but in that charged atmosphere, it sounded like a gunshot. I can't breathe. She gasped, clutching her chest, her face turning ashen. I feel sick to my stomach. All eyes turned to her. Another person nearby suddenly cried out, I feel dizzy too. My head is spinning. The nocebo effect had begun. In psychology, when a person believes they have been exposed to a harmful substance, their body can manifest real physical symptoms, even if the substance is imaginary. And in a panicked crowd, fear is more contagious than any virus. One by one, then in groups, people began to complain of symptoms, stomach cramps, nausea, heart palpitations. The lavish party quickly devolved into chaos. There was screaming, the sound of breaking glass, people frantically calling 911. Brenda stood frozen in the middle of the room, her face a mask of disbelief. The party she had thrown to flaunt her status had become a disaster, a public laughingstock. And it all started with a tiny piece of paper. From my hotel balcony, I watched the flashing lights of the ambulances in the distance and took a slow sip of my wine. My drama was just getting to the good part. From the hotel balcony, I could hear the wail of ambulance sirens tearing through the quiet night of the exclusive neighborhood. Their flashing red and blue lights painted the white walls of my mansion in a chaotic, ghostly light. Their party had truly become a catastrophe, not from any physical poison, but from the invisible toxin of mass hysteria. I felt no glee, no guilt. I just stood there, my glass of red wine untouched, observing the drama I had directed with the cold detachment of a scientist watching a psychological experiment. I knew exactly what would happen when the fear of death was planted in a crowd already tipsy and full of social rivalry. It would blossom into uncontrollable panic. Each person would interpret the most normal physical sensations, a stomachache from overeating, dizziness from too much wine, as symptoms of a deadly poison. It was the nocebo effect, the dark twin of the placebo, the power of the mind to destroy itself. My phone started vibrating. As expected, it was Michael. I calmly answered. Evelyn, where are you? What the hell did you do? His voice on the other end was not one of concern, but of pure rage and panic. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied, my voice intentionally weak and bewildered. Don't play dumb with me. That note. Did you put poison in the wine? Are you trying to kill my entire family? He screamed, his voice mixed with the chaotic sounds in the background. I paused, letting his fury peak. Then, I spoke slowly, my voice trembling as if I were wrongly accused. Michael, what are you saying? You and your mother threw me out of my own house. I haven't even had a chance to process it. How could I possibly poison anyone? What note? What's happening at home? My feigned innocence seemed to stop him in his tracks. He stammered, the note in the wine bottle. Everyone. Mom and all the guests, they think they've been poisoned. The paramedics are taking everyone to the hospital. Oh my God. I let out a perfectly timed, horrified gasp. How could that happen? Is everyone okay? Are you okay? My genuine-sounding concern hit its mark, feeding his confusion. He stopped shouting. His voice cracked. I don't know. I didn't drink any. But Mom, she said she was having trouble breathing. It's a total madhouse here. You need to get back here. Get back here and fix what you've done. What I've done. I started to cry, the tears of a master actress. I don't even know what's going on. How can you suspect me? After everything, you still think I'm that kind of person? With that, I hung up, giving him no chance to respond. I knew that abrupt end would plant a new seed of doubt in his mind. He would start to wonder, what if I was wrong? If it wasn't Evelyn, then who was it? Mutual suspicion was the next act in my play. I watched as the ambulances left one by one, carrying away people who were convincing themselves they were dying. I knew it was going to be a long night. Brenda, a woman who valued her reputation more than life itself, was now facing a public relations nightmare. A mass poisoning at a private party in a prestigious family's home by morning. That news would spread like wildfire. And I knew the next phone calls wouldn't be filled with anger, but with desperation. I poured myself another glass of wine. My drama had only just begun, Act 1. The best part, the part where she would call me 7 times, was still to come. That night, the emergency room at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center was in an uproar. More than a dozen patients from Brenda Harrison's party were rushed in, all seemingly in critical condition. Some clutched their stomachs, moaning in agony. Others complained of severe dizziness and nausea. One man swore his heart was beating erratically and was about to stop. Doctors and nurses were mobilized, a high-stakes, tense atmosphere filling the air as they drew blood, ran tests, performed EKGs, and did ultrasounds. Every standard procedure for a mass poisoning event was executed with urgency. Brenda and Michael ran back and forth between rooms, a frantic ballet of anxiety. Brenda tried to maintain the facade of a responsible hostess, constantly reassuring her guests. Everyone, just stay calm. This is the best hospital in the city. I'm here. It's all going to be okay. But deep in her eyes was a terror she couldn't hide. She wasn't afraid for her guests' lives. She was afraid that her family's reputation, the social standing she had spent her life cultivating, would be utterly destroyed by morning. But then, something strange happened. After hours of frantic testing, the results came back, baffling the entire medical team. Every single patient's lab work was completely normal. No toxins in their blood, stable EKGs, clear ultrasounds. The chief of emergency medicine, a seasoned doctor, personally went to speak with Brenda and Michael after reviewing all the charts. He frowned, his voice laced with confusion. "Mrs. Harrison, Mr. Harrison, we've run every conceivable test, but we can't find any signs of poisoning. The symptoms everyone is describing. There seems to be no medical basis for them." Brenda was stunned. "What do you mean, doctor? If there's no poison, then why is everyone?" "It could be a case of mild food intolerance combined with a powerful psychological element. Mass hysteria," the doctor explained professionally. "We recommend keeping everyone for observation, but fundamentally, none of them are in any life-threatening danger." The doctor's words didn't bring Brenda relief. They were like a bucket of ice water to the face. No poison. Did that mean all this chaos was her fault, caused by that damned note? The news quickly spread to the guests, and their fear erupted into fury. "Brenda, you'd better explain this. What is going on?" A CEO, who moments before had been writhing in pain, now stood with his hands on his hips, his face red with anger. "Did you invite us to a party or a circus?" Another woman, who had been gasping for air, now shrieked. "I had to cancel my flight to Aspen because of this. How are you going to compensate me?" "You need to pay for our damages." The ER transformed from a place of healing into a chaotic courtroom. Brenda was surrounded, people demanding compensation, shouting insults, threatening lawsuits for emotional distress and reputational harm. She stood frozen, never having felt so humiliated and powerless in her life. She tried to explain, but no one listened. Her elegant designer gown now looked absurdly out of place. Seeing his mother under attack, Michael tried to intervene, but he was caught in the crossfire. "You're in on it too. Your whole family tricked us." In her desperation, Brenda pulled out her phone again. This time, when she called me, her voice was no longer haughty and commanding. "Evelyn, can you come to the hospital? Right now?" Her voice trembled, mixed with the cacophony around her. Everything is falling apart. Please, come and say something. You were the hostess too, after all. I sat calmly in my hotel room, listening. I could picture her pathetic state perfectly. Oh, Brenda, I'm not feeling well at all, I said, my voice weak. After the shock of last night, I've been feeling sick. My heart's been racing. I think I might have been affected by that herb too. I was just about to call a doctor. Hearing this, Brenda latched on as if to a lifeline. There, you see? You were affected too. Tell everyone. Tell them there really was a poison, that I'm not making it up. She shrieked into the phone. I paused, then sighed softly. But Brenda, if there really was a poison, and the best hospital in LA can't find it, it must be a very special kind of poison, one that leaves no trace. Have you considered that? Have you considered who might do something like this? My question, so innocent on the surface, was a sharp psychological scalpel. It officially opened a new chapter in my drama, the hunt for a non-existent enemy. To our listeners, witnessing the chaos created by a single lie, I realized how terrifying the power of the human mind is. It can manifest illness from delusion, and it can also heal the deepest wounds. The human mind is like a garden. If you plant seeds of suspicion and fear, it will grow poisonous weeds. But if you plant seeds of trust and forgiveness, it will blossom with fragrant flowers. Perhaps the ultimate cure for all of life's ailments lies in how we choose to think and react. What are your thoughts on this? In her frantic state, Brenda didn't see the trap in my question. She just clung to it as her last hope. She started screaming, and I knew her madness and her phone calls were about to get much, much worse. My suggestion of a special poison that leaves no trace acted like a potent stimulant, pushing Brenda's and the crowd's paranoia to a new level. The hospital couldn't find a toxin? That didn't mean there wasn't a poison. It just proved how sophisticated and dangerous it was, beyond the capabilities of modern medicine. This absurd logic, in a disoriented and frightened group, became strangely convincing. Brenda immediately relayed my analysis to her guests. Instead of calming down, they grew even more frantic. They began to believe they were carrying some insidious, latent disease, a ticking time bomb that could go off at any moment. Their anger at Brenda was temporarily replaced by an all-encompassing fear. They demanded the hospital run more advanced, specialized tests, fly in experts from the CDC, and find the poison at any cost. The hospital had become a refugee camp for the dying. And that's when the 77 horrifying phone calls began. From dawn the next day, my phone never rested. It buzzed and rang incessantly, a constant reminder of a person's complete and utter breakdown. The first few calls were from Michael. He wasn't yelling anymore. His voice was pleading and exhausted. "Evelyn, please come back. I'm begging you. Everyone is freaking out at the hospital. The doctors say it's nothing, but nobody believes them. They're holding me and Mom responsible." I just replied in a weak voice, "I'm scared too, Michael. I'm still having trouble breathing. I'm afraid to go out. You just take care of your mom and everyone else." After Michael, calls started coming from unknown numbers. It was the guests. They no longer spoke to me with arrogance. They were fishing for information. "Miss Reed? Did you eat or drink anything unusual last night? Do you suspect anyone?" I answered vaguely. "I really don't know. I'm just as confused as you are." But the true star of this marathon of calls was Brenda. Her first call of the day came around 7 a.m. "Evelyn, are you awake? How are you feeling? Any better?" Her voice was filled with concern, but I knew it was concern for herself. "I'm still the same, Brenda. A bit nauseous," I replied. "So, have you thought of anyone who could have done this?" She got straight to the point. "Do you have any enemies? Or were any of the catering staff acting suspiciously?" She was desperately searching for a scapegoat. I pretended to think for a moment. "I don't know, Brenda. I've never intentionally wronged anyone, but I just remembered something." "What? What is it? Tell me," she urged. "The other day, when I was tidying up Michael's home office, I found a small, unmarked vial. It had some white powder inside. When I asked him about it, he just brushed it off, said it was a supplement a friend gave him. I thought it was strange, so I threw it out. I wonder if it's connected." Boom! Another piece of disinformation was deployed. I knew that with her suspicious nature and current panic, Brenda would immediately turn on her own son. Sure enough, after a second of silence, she stammered, "Michael? No, it can't be." Then she quickly hung up. I smiled. The play of a family tearing itself apart had begun. Less than 30 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was Brenda. "Evelyn, I asked Michael. He said there was no vial. He's denying it. Are you sure you saw it?" "I'm positive, Brenda. It was in his desk drawer. But maybe I was mistaken. Or maybe he just doesn't want to admit it. Don't worry about it." The more I told her not to worry, the more she would. The third, fourth, and fifth calls followed. She started listing Michael's suspicious behaviors from the past few weeks' secretive phone calls, his constant sighing. She was building her own narrative in which her son was a sinister conspirator. By noon, her panic was at a fever pitch. The guests were threatening to call the police. The media had caught wind of a scandal, and reporters were lurking outside the hospital. Brenda called me, this time sobbing hysterically. "Evelyn, save me. You're the only one who can save me now. You're a psychologist. You're brilliant. Please, talk to everyone. Tell them it was just a misunderstanding. Or do you have the antidote? You know what it is, don't you? That note was from you. You must know what that herb was. Tell me, I'm begging you. I'll give you money. Whatever you want. Money." Even at this stage, she thought money could solve everything. I let out a long, dramatic sigh into the phone. "Brenda, I don't know the antidote. But I think I know who might have created the poison." Who is it?" she screamed, like a drowning person grasping at a piece of driftwood. I paused for a few seconds, letting her anticipation build to its peak. Then, I uttered the name that would shift the entire drama into a new, darker, and more profound act. "Perhaps," I said, my voice a whisper, yet as clear as a final judgment, "it was you." The line went dead silent. I could picture Brenda's face, her expression shifting from desperate hope to utter, stupefied shock. What did you say?" she stammered after a long moment. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer directly. Instead, I began to use my professional expertise, turning the phone call into an impromptu therapy session, one where the patient had no idea she was being psychologically dismantled. "Brenda, please, calm down and listen to me." My voice became gentle and empathetic, the same tone I used with my clients. "Do you remember? In my book, I wrote about the power of suggestion. When a person believes something with intense conviction, their mind can create corresponding physical reactions. Brenda, do you think that note might have triggered some deep-seated fear within you?" "Fear? What am I afraid of?" Brenda snapped, but her voice had lost its conviction. "Just think back," I continued to guide her. "Before the note appeared, how were you feeling? You were ecstatic, triumphant that you had thrown me out, weren't you? You felt like you had won, but deep down, was there a tiny bit of guilt? A little anxiety about the consequences? Silence. I knew I had hit a nerve. And then the note appeared, talking about an herb. Your mind, already in a complex state of triumph and guilt, immediately latched onto it. It transformed your vague anxiety into a tangible fear, the fear of being poisoned, of being punished. And when you became afraid, your body reacted. Your heart raced, you felt short of breath. Those weren't the symptoms of a poison, Brenda. They were the symptoms of a panic attack. You're lying," she screamed, but it was weak. "Then why did everyone else get sick? Were they all having a panic attack?" "Precisely," I said. "It's called mass psychogenic illness, or psychological contagion. When a credible figure in a group you exhibits fear, and another susceptible person, the elderly woman with a heart condition, shows the first symptoms, that fear spreads like a plague. People start scanning their own bodies, searching for anything unusual, and they will find something, because none of us feel perfect all the time. A case of heartburn becomes a sign of poisoning. A dizzy spell from a drop in blood pressure becomes a neurotoxin." They weren't lying, Brenda. They really felt those symptoms. But the cause wasn't in the wine bottle. It was in their own minds. I used my knowledge as a scalpel, methodically dissecting her psychological defenses. Brenda couldn't argue, because what I said, though complex, perfectly explained the ongoing chaos. So what do we do now? Her voice trembled, almost a plea. Is there really no antidote? There is an antidote, Brenda, I said mysteriously. But it's not a pill. It's medicine for the soul. What is it? Tell me. The truth, I said. Everyone was made sick by a lie, and only the truth can heal them. You started this story, Brenda. Only you can end it. You have to tell them the truth about why that note appeared in the first place. No, I can't, she shrieked. If I tell them, I'll be humiliated. I'll have no face left. So, you'd rather watch everyone live in fear. You'd rather face lawsuits and a police investigation. They won't stop until they find a culprit, Brenda. And when they can't find one, who do you think they'll blame? A deathly silence. She understood. If there was no perpetrator, then she, the hostess, the one who started the panic, would become the perpetrator. I knew I had backed her into a corner. It was either lose face or lose everything. The calls continued the 10th, 20th, 30th. She would call me begging for another way out, then call Michael to cry, then call me again to curse me. But the wall I had built was impenetrable. The truth, or nothing, that was my only answer. In a call later that afternoon, when her exhaustion and despair were at their peak, I delivered the final psychological blow. Brenda, I have an idea. You don't have to tell the truth to everyone. You just have to tell it to me. Tell me everything, from beginning to end, without hiding a thing. Tell me how you treated me, why you threw me out. Think of me as your psychologist, a place to unburden yourself. Who knows, once you've confessed everything, you might feel better. And the antidote might just appear. It was the perfect trap, an irresistible offer. I was giving her a chance to confess in private, a final thread of hope to cling to. And I knew she would take it, because I knew that even as we were speaking, the record button on my phone was already active and waiting. The fateful call came close to midnight. After dozens of frantic calls throughout the day, my phone fell strangely silent for a few hours. I knew it was the calm before the storm. Brenda was at war with herself, weighing her pride against the terror of losing everything. And then, it rang. I looked at her number, took a deep breath, and pressed the record button before answering. Evelyn. It's me. Her voice on the other end was hoarse and exhausted, completely drained of life. I agree. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything. I said nothing, just waited in silence. My silence now carried more weight than any question. It forced her to confront herself, to face the sins she had tried to bury. And then, like a broken dam, it all poured out. She wept the sound of someone who had completely shattered. She recounted everything, starting from the first day I married into the family. She confessed that she had disliked me from the very beginning. She was jealous of my success, jealous that her son loved and respected me so much. I wasn't used to it, she sobbed. I wasn't used to being overshadowed in my own family. I was always the one in charge. But after you came, Michael only listened to you. That house. It was your house. I felt like a guest. She confessed to deliberately starting petty arguments, to bad-mouthing me to Michael. She admitted that bringing Tiffany to live with us wasn't out of love for her daughter, but to create an ally, to isolate me further. I thought if I just made you tired and miserable, you would give up. You'd become obedient, you'd listen to me. But you only grew stronger, more successful. I couldn't stand it. Her confession was both repulsive and, in a strange way, pitiable. All her cruelty stemmed from a deep-seated insecurity, a fear of losing power. She didn't hate me. She was projecting her own inadequacies onto me. She went on, talking about the last straw, my lost project, and her sick satisfaction at my misery. In that moment, I thought I had won. I thought I could finally get rid of you, and Michael could marry someone else, someone obedient who would put me first. And then she spoke of the party, of how deliriously happy she was after throwing me out. I thought it was the happiest day of my life. I never imagined it would turn into the apocalypse. I remained silent, letting her speak, letting every word be clearly recorded. The confession lasted nearly 30 minutes. She had laid her entire self bare. A petty, selfish, and pathetic human being. When she had nothing left to say, only choked sobs, I finally spoke. My voice was still calm and gentle. "Are you finished, Brenda?" "Yes, I'm finished. Do you feel any better?" I don't know," she whispered. "I just want this to be over. Do you have the antidote now? You promised me." I paused for a few seconds. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the final blow. "Brenda," I said, my voice turning a few degrees colder. "I already told you, the antidote is the truth, and you just told it. But everyone is still at the hospital. They're still terrified. Then use that truth to heal them," I said. "Go and tell them exactly what you just told me. Admit that there was no poison, that it was all a lie born from your own jealousy, and that lie is what poisoned everyone's minds." "No, I can't do that," she shrieked again, desperation returning. "I can't be humiliated like that. You tricked me, you promised." "I didn't trick you," I replied, my voice now hard as steel. "I only said that when you told the truth, the antidote would appear. I never said I would give it to you. And I think there's something else you should know." I paused, letting the silence amplify the weight of my next words. "Our entire conversation, your entire confession, has been recorded. Now, I'm giving you two choices. 1, you go to the hospital yourself, get on your knees, and apologize to every single person there, admitting the entire truth. 2, I send this recording not only to your guests, but to every news outlet in LA. You have 24 hours to decide." With that, I hung up. I gave her no more chances to beg or curse. I sat on the bed, my hands still shaking. I had done something ruthless, but I knew it was the only way to end this sick drama. I had given her a way out. A humiliating one, but a way out nonetheless. The choice was hers. I looked out the window. The sky was beginning to lighten. A long night was over. And I knew that whichever path she chose for her family, the sun would never truly rise again. The 24 hours I gave Brenda were likely the longest of her life. I didn't call, didn't text. I just waited. I knew a ferocious battle was raging inside her mind, her deep-seated, fragile pride versus the abject terror of becoming a social pariah. I had offered her a path to end the drama with the least possible public fallout, confess to the involved parties, endure a contained humiliation, rather than have her sins broadcast to the world. I didn't have to wait the full 24 hours. Around 10 a.m. the next morning, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. "Hello, Ms. Reed? This is Robert Hunt, one of the guests from the party." The man's voice was tired but much calmer. "Hello, Mr. Hunt," I replied. "Are you and the others feeling better?" "We are," he said with a dry laugh. Amazing how quickly everyone recovered after hearing Brenda's confession. "I'm calling to let you know what happened, and also to offer an apology on behalf of everyone. We were fools to believe her drama and cause such a scene." "So she told you?" I asked, feigning surprise. "Told us everything. Last night, she gathered us all in the hospital lobby. She got on her knees, crying, and admitted it all, that there was no poison, that she made it up based on a sick joke because she was jealous of you. She begged for our forgiveness, begged us not to make it a bigger issue." I was silent. She had chosen her path. Another performance of tears, reframing her malicious plot as a mere sick joke. But at least she had been forced to bow her head. "So, what will everyone do now?" I asked. "What can we do? It's all out in the open. We just feel like idiots. A few hotheads wanted to press charges, but what's the point? There is one thing, though." Mr. Hunt hesitated. "This can't just end here. Our reputations, our time, our businesses were affected. We've all agreed not to pursue criminal charges, but she must make amends, both financially and for the damage to our honor. I had anticipated this. That's between all of you and her. I don't have an opinion." "No, Miss Reed, this involves you," he said. "We know you're the real victim here, and we wanted to ask what you think we should do. If you want, we will all stand as witnesses for you and bring this to the attention of the law. If you'd rather let it go." "I understand," I cut in. "I don't want to pursue this any further." I just want peace. But if you and the others need leverage, I think I have something that might help. I sought Mr. Hunt the audio file of Brenda's confession. This is your trump card, I told him. Use it to demand a formal, written apology and a reasonable settlement. I don't think she'll be in a position to refuse. And that is exactly what happened. Faced with the undeniable recording, Brenda had no room to maneuver. She was forced to accept all their demands. Another meeting was held, not a lavish party, but a humiliating apology session. Brenda had to stand before all the guests again and formally admit her wrongdoing. She had to sign a legal agreement and, most importantly, compensate each guest a substantial sum for emotional damages. I don't know the exact figure, but I know it was enough to make a significant dent in whatever savings she had. The Beverly Hills poisoning scandal was finally over. It never made the headlines, but it left an indelible scar within the elite social circle Brenda so desperately wanted to conquer. She became a cautionary tale, a running joke whispered over afternoon tea. The reputation she had spent a lifetime building had shattered into a million pieces. I never received another call from her. That silence was more telling than any curse. I knew I was finally free of her. But what about Michael? Where was he during his mother's crisis? What had he done? The answer came a few days later in an email. It wasn't an apology or a plea for me to come back. The subject line read just 2 words: I understand. Curious, I opened it. The contents were even more surprising. Attached was a scanned document, a petition for dissolution of marriage, a divorce form. In the email, Michael had written only a few short lines. Evelyn, I've already signed. There's no excuse for my cowardice. You deserve a better life. Let's set each other free. I stared at his signature. A strange sense of relief washed over me. He was finally letting go. But why now? Why so easily? My intuition told me there was more to this story. A truth perhaps even more painful than his betrayal. We wish to note that this story contains creative elements, potentially enhanced by AI tools, to deliver a dramatic, engaging narrative while exploring profound themes of life, love, and family. The signed divorce petition on my screen was cold and final. Instead of feeling triumphant, a seed of doubt was planted in my mind. A weak man who had always lived under his mother's thumb, why would he make such a decisive move so quickly? He didn't even try to win me back, didn't offer a direct apology. He just gave up. His surrender was so effortless, it felt wrong. I called an old acquaintance, a private investigator. I gave him a simple task. Find out what Michael Harrison has been up to lately, who he's been seeing. I didn't want to dig into his life anymore, but I needed to know his departure was genuine and not part of another scheme. 2 days later, the PI called back. Evelyn, I have the information, but you might want to sit down. Just tell me, I said, my heart suddenly pounding. Well, your ex hasn't been staying with his mother. He moved into a condo in Santa Monica a few days ago, and he's not alone. I held my breath. He's living with another woman, a younger woman named Valerie. According to my sources, they've been seeing each other for almost a year. A year! The number hit me like a sledgehammer. For the past year, while I was shouldering the entire family, while I was enduring my mother-in-law's abuse, my mild-mannered husband was busy building another life on the side. Everything suddenly clicked into place. His silence, his avoidance, and the ease with which he signed the divorce papers. It wasn't that he understood, it was that he already had another option, another place to go. He didn't need me anymore. The pain of this betrayal was 100 times worse. I was furious at my mother-in-law's abuse, but being deceived so blatantly by the man I loved, my world collapsed. All the promises, the loving gestures, all of it was just a clumsy performance to hide a sordid truth. Is there anything else? I asked, my voice hoarse. One more thing. The PI hesitated. The woman, Valerie, she's about 5 months pregnant. If the first piece of news was a sledgehammer, this was a dagger through the heart. 5 months pregnant. That meant, while I was still trying to save our marriage, he already had a new family on the way, a child about to be born. A wave of disgust rose in my throat. The pain was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated contempt. What had I sacrificed for this man? The Stanford Ph.D., my personal ambitions, my peace of mind. And this was my reward. I hung up without another word. I sat motionless, staring out the window. The LA sky was still bright and sunny, but a bitter winter had descended upon my heart. I cried. I cried for my own foolishness, for 10 years of my life thrown away. But then, I wiped my tears. I would not let myself be broken again. That man, that family, they were not worth a single one of my tears. He wanted to be set free? Fine. I would grant his wish. But it wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be free. I called my lawyer. I agree to the divorce, I said. But not an amicable one. I want to go to trial. A trial where all of this comes to light. I didn't need to fight for assets. The mansion was mine. My company was mine. But I needed something else. I needed justice. I needed him to stand in court and face the consequences of his adultery, to answer for his deceit. I wanted him to pay, not just with money, but with his reputation. My drama wasn't over. It had just entered a new act, one with no room for lies or crocodile tears. To our listeners, is there any pain greater than betrayal from the one you trust most? When a marriage is built on a foundation of deceit, is it worth saving? They say you shouldn't kick a man when he's down, but for someone who turned his back on his vows, who chased a new happiness built on the suffering of another, is forgiveness the right choice? And is bringing the painful truth to light the best way to heal and truly set yourself free? Please share your thoughts. The decision to go to court wasn't an act of rage. It was a calculated choice made after a long, sleepless night. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it to protect myself and to draw a definitive, clear line under a bitter chapter of my life. I couldn't just sign the papers, walk away quietly, and let Michael and his mistress start their new life built on my suffering. The truth had to be acknowledged. He was wrong, and he had to be held accountable. I contacted the PI again and asked for a complete file. Photos, videos of Michael and Valerie living together, and most importantly, proof of her pregnancy. Everything had to be airtight and irrefutable. Meanwhile, I began to reclaim my life. I had all the locks on the mansion changed. I packed up everything that belonged to Michael, his clothes, books, personal items into cardboard boxes. I didn't throw them away, nor did I keep them. I simply stacked them neatly in a corner of the storage room, waiting for the day he came to collect them. With every item packed, a memory was put away. It was painful, yes, but overwhelmingly, it was liberating. I was cleansing my house and my soul of the ghosts of the past. A few days later, my lawyer officially served Michael with a court summons. I could imagine his face when he received it. He must have thought everything would be settled quietly. He never expected me to confront him head-on. His first call came quickly, his voice a mixture of confusion and anger. "Evelyn, what are you doing? I already signed the papers. Why do we have to go to court? Are you trying to humiliate me?" "Humiliate you?" I laughed coldly into the phone. "The only one who has humiliated you is yourself. Did you really think you could sign a piece of paper and wipe the slate clean? Erase the fact that you cheated on me and had a child with another woman while we were still married? Michael, you have severely underestimated me." The line went silent. He was shocked that I knew everything. "How long have you known?" he stammered. "That doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that we will now have this conversation in front of a judge, with evidence and lawyers. You'd better get ready." The hearing took place a month later. It was a closed session. At my request. I didn't want to turn my private life into a public spectacle. I just wanted the fair judgment of the law. Michael came to court alone. No Valerie, no Brenda. He looked thinner, haggard. His expensive suit couldn't hide the exhaustion and anxiety on his face. In court, faced with the mountain of irrefutable evidence, my lawyer presented the photos, the videos, copies of Valerie's prenatal records. Michael had nothing to say. He hung his head and admitted to the affair. The judge's ruling was swift. The divorce was granted, with the fault placed entirely on Michael. I retained all of my separate property, including the mansion. For the marital assets acquired during our marriage, though not substantial, the court awarded me the larger share. But what mattered most to me wasn't the money. It was the line in the final judgment. It is determined that Mr. Michael Harrison committed a serious violation of the marital contract, which was the primary cause for the dissolution of this marriage. That sentence was worth more to me than any amount of money. It was legal validation. It was the restoration of my honor after so many lies and so much pain. After the hearing, as I walked out, Michael was waiting in the hallway. He approached me, his voice hoarse. "Evelyn, I am truly sorry." I looked at him, the man I once loved with all my heart, now a complete stranger. I didn't see genuine remorse in his eyes, only weariness and regret for what he had lost. "It's over, Michael," I said calmly. "You don't owe me an apology. You owe her and that child a future. Go and live a good life." Then I turned and walked away, and I never looked back. I knew that from that moment on, our paths had truly diverged. As for Brenda, after being punished by her guests, she had to sell a piece of family land back in Ohio to pay the settlements. That, combined with the shock of her son's affair and divorce, caused her to have a complete breakdown. She became a recluse, hiding in a small rented apartment. Occasionally, she would call me, not to yell, but to ask weakly how I was doing. I never answered. Some wounds once inflicted can never be healed. I chose to move forward, to leave the past behind. 1 year later, a year after the divorce, my life had turned a new page, one more brilliant and peaceful than I could have ever imagined. I didn't bury myself in work to forget the pain. Instead, I learned to slow down. I dedicated more time to myself, to hobbies I had long abandoned. I started taking painting classes again, spending afternoons wandering through art galleries. I traveled alone, visiting new countries, meeting new people. Each journey was not just an exploration of the world, but a rediscovery of myself, a strong, independent, and free woman. My career took an unexpected turn for the better. No longer shackled by family drama, I could devote myself fully to my projects. My new book, On the Psychology of Healing After Betrayal, became a publishing phenomenon, helping countless people in similar situations. I received thousands of emails and messages from readers, telling me my story and analysis gave them the courage to stand up again. That validation was more precious than any award. It showed me that my pain, once transformed, could become a light for others. I decided to start a small charitable foundation called Sunrise, dedicated to providing free legal aid and psychological counseling to women who are victims of domestic abuse and marital injustice. I wanted to use my knowledge and my experience to help them find their voice and reclaim their right to happiness. The mansion in Beverly Hills, once a repository of so much pain, was completely renovated. It was no longer just a home, but an art and wellness space, hosting exhibitions, psychology workshops, and creative retreats. I wanted to turn a symbol of brokenness into a place of rebirth and healing. I still heard news about the old family through mutual acquaintances. After the divorce, Michael and Valerie moved in together to raise their son, but their life was far from the fairy tale he had imagined. Without the lavish lifestyle I provided, and facing the pressures of a new family with a mediocre career, Michael became irritable and constantly stressed. Arguments were frequent, as the materialistic young woman was no longer so sweet when faced with the reality of bills and budgets. They were reaping what they had sown. Brenda lived alone in a small house on the outskirts of the city. Tiffany, seeing the family's decline, had quickly married a man from out of state and cut off almost all contact with her mother and brother. Brenda still tried to call me sometimes, just to say hello, but I never picked up. For me, forgiveness didn't mean reconnecting. It meant letting go and moving on. One weekend afternoon, as I was reading in my garden, the doorbell rang. A delivery man brought a stunning pot of white Phalaenopsis orchids. There was no sender's name, just a small card with a single line of handwriting. "Thank you for teaching me what it means to grow up." I knew who it was from. I didn't throw the flowers away. I placed them in a corner of the garden where they could get the morning sun. To me, the orchid wasn't a symbol of reconciliation, but a final, true farewell to the past. I smiled, a smile of pure serenity. The storm had passed. I had lost a marriage, but I had found myself. I learned that the greatest happiness isn't being loved by someone else, but learning to love and cherish yourself. And that after every long, dark night, the sun will always rise again, more brilliant and warmer than ever before. Dear listeners, as this story concludes, it likely leaves us with much to ponder. We want to emphasize that the events and messages conveyed are for educational and entertainment purposes, aiming to provide deeper insights into human psychology, self-worth, and navigating complex family dynamics. From Evelyn's journey, we can draw invaluable life lessons. The most poignant is the fine line between sacrifice and self-annihilation. In love, we often give unconditionally, putting our passions on hold to support a partner and embrace their family, all for the dream of a happy home. But compassion without boundaries and self-respect quickly becomes enablement. When we constantly retreat in the face of unreasonable demands, we are not building respect. We are digging a grave for our own value. Selfish people will never know when to stop. Furthermore, this story is a powerful testament to the strength of intellect and independence. How did Evelyn manage such a spectacular turnaround? Because she had knowledge and a financial foundation she built herself. Her retaliation wasn't about screaming matches or blind hatred. It was rooted in a profound understanding of human psychology. Evelyn used the inner demons of her in-laws, their greed, their vanity, their fear, as the very weapons of their undoing. This reminds us that a person's strongest armor isn't a wealthy spouse or a powerful family, but a clear mind, a strong heart, and the ability to stand on one's own 2 feet. We also see a profound truth about karma. The consequences for wrongdoing don't always need an external force. They often sprout from the minds of the perpetrators themselves. Brenda's party collapsed not because of a real poison, but because of a delusion born from her own guilt and jealousy. When people live a life of deceit, they imprison themselves in a cage of fear. A happiness built on betrayal, like that of Michael and his mistress, will inevitably crumble under the weight of reality. Finally, there is the lesson of letting go to be reborn. The most profound revenge isn't watching your enemy fall. It's living a life 1,000 times more brilliant and joyful. Evelyn's forgiveness wasn't about reconciliation. It was about releasing the burden of hatred so she could walk forward unencumbered. Her turning her painful experience into a foundation to help other women is the most beautiful way to transform pain into light. Life doesn't promise to be fair, but it always gives us the power to write our own ending. As the writer who adapted this story, I am left with deep thoughts on the value and identity of women in marriage. We are often taught to be patient, to be forgiving, to maintain peace, but we are rarely reminded that patience without wisdom is fertile ground for selfishness to grow. The character of Evelyn showed me a painful but necessary awakening. Never let your kindness become a weapon others can choose to hurt you. Emotional abuse in a family may not leave physical bruises, but it silently erodes the soul and destroys self-esteem. Her retaliation was a masterclass in using intellect and self-possession, not anger. The most painful karma for the greedy and the unfaithful often comes not from an outside force, but from the darkness within their own conscience. I was truly moved by how Evelyn chose to close her past, not with lingering hatred, but by building a brilliant new life and using her light to heal others. True happiness is not finding someone to lean on, but becoming a rock for yourself in the storm. May anyone trapped in a toxic relationship find strength in this story to bravely walk away. Life is short. Save your precious love and sacrifice for those who truly deserve it. Before we close, our team wants to share our mission. Among the countless family stories online, our goal is not simply to produce repetitive content for entertainment. Through Evelyn's story, we aim to provide an in-depth analysis of behavioral psychology. We want to educate our audience on recognizing forms of emotional abuse and toxic psychological manipulation in relationships, as well as the power of the nocebo effect. Furthermore, this story was carefully crafted to inspire financial independence and self-respect in the modern woman.